Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. Joffrey Noodle Eggs here today with something a little different. We're going to take a little week's break from horror movies. I know it's strange, and we're going to look at another passion of mine, which is Formula One racing. I absolutely adore Formula One racing. So today this week we're going to be looking at a couple of we're going to be looking at a movie based around the Formula One, and we're going to be looking at a documentary also based around Formula One. And hopefully at the end of the week we will have my race of the Formula One Australian Grand Prix on Formula One 23 on the PlayStation 5. So just to give a little sort of like mix up my just give a little something different this week. So today we're going to start off with the documentary movie called Senna. Now this is based on Ayrton Senna. Ayrton Senna was like a 1980s, 90s racing driver. He was a 3 times world champion. Absolutely, and he's one of my favourite drivers of all time. And this documentary is, although it's a documentary, it's not like one with loads of like interview clips with other people. It is basically all about Senna, and you see interview clips of him and some of his races and all kinds of things, and this really delves into his life a little bit. He started off in the 1970s, late 70s and early 80s as a go-kart racer, and he was highly successful, and he sort of like got seen and sort of like made his way into the Formula 2 and 1. And Formula 1, he arrived on the scene as like the next hot thing. He was going to be the next biggest thing in the race, and because he was absolutely fearless almost. He was quite an aggressive racer, which I think you have to be successful in Formula 1. And he was a very religious man as well, and he kind of really believed in God, and God was very, very important to him. And so he did this documentary, follows him with his career in Formula One, when he kind of like started off with, he done, I can't remember the team he started off with, but his most famous team was McLaren. He was with McLaren. He also went with Lotus for a little while in the sort of like late 80s. Lotus were top of their game in Formula One back then. You may remember them with their famous sort of black car, where Ferrari had the famous red car and Lotus had the sort of black car. And then as years went on, that went to a sort of green sort of car. But yeah, he did a stint with them, but it took him a couple of years to sort of like get to the top. But he was absolutely amazing, and this sort of documentary visualizes some of his most successful and incredible victories, and his 3 world championship wins with McLaren. And it also focuses on his rivalry, which was with Alain Prost, who actually started off as his teammate at McLaren's, but they tend to really sort of because they were both sort of like really the top 2 drivers, and they always sort of fought over sort of like the championship. And I think it came to a lot of politics, and this documentary shows the politics behind Formula One, especially in the championship year, where it was down to the last race between Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna. Now, at the time, the president of Formula One was a Frenchman. Obviously, Alain Prost is a Frenchman. Ayrton Senna, he was Brazilian. Now, it was down to the last race, and they came to, like, there was one part where they were really battling it out, and Alain Prost did not give him any space on this corner, and he ended up running into the side of him, and they both went off the track. Now, Alain Prost, if neither of them finished, Alain Prost would become the champion. Ayrton Senna had to win the race to become the champion. So anyway, this race, they were both off the track. And it's one of these really strange corners at the race where I'm not sure, can't remember if it was Japanese Grand Prix, but it was like a chicane. And there's also like a sort of a side bit which you can sort of go weave through to rejoin the track. Now, Ayrton Senna managed to get his car started again. Had he went that way and went back onto the track, and then he went on. He had the bits broken from his car changed, and went to the pits. And when he came out, he worked his way up and he won the race. But Alain Prost sort of like appealed against it, saying because he went through this thing, he rejoined the track by not taking that chicane corner. So he broken the sort of like it was in violation of the rules. And although Ayrton Senna's argument was if he would have reversed backwards, he would have gone onto a track where he could have crashed into more cars. So he went that way for safety. And the French president took Alain Prost's side, and Ayrton Senna got a 6-month ban. He got fined like $100,000, and Alain Prost became the champion. And then sort of like the following year, they were discussing it at the track, and then everyone agreed that if that happened in that corner, then you must take that route and join the track there. Don't worry about the chicane. So you can see the politics of that. And Ayrton Senna is absolutely livid about that, because it was last year, that wasn't allowed because of this sort of like, because of that appeal. And it's really, really sort of like, you can see the politics in Formula One, and there's a lot of them still today. Formula One is pretty much about money, and it's about the politics, and whoever's got the most money can do the better things with their car and their drivers, and it's still like that today. But this documentary follows Ayrton Senna, and you get to meet him, his parents, and he's quite a fun guy, and he's got a really strong connection with his country, Brazil. And I think Brazil at the time were going through a really hard time. A lot of sort of like, it was quite a poor country, and a lot of people struggling, and Ayrton Senna gave the country a bit of a lift, because he was winning all his races, and he was so proud. Whenever he won a race, he would fly the flag, and so all of Brazil looked up to Ayrton Senna. And it goes through his many sort of championships. He wins 2 of them. One of them he wins a little bit like Alain Prost, because him and Alain Prost again the following year have a crash again. But this time the foot's on the other hand. Alain Prost had to win the championship. If he didn't win, then Ayrton Senna won. And this year, obviously, they crashed again because of the rivalry. And they really didn't like each other. So then I believe the following year, Alain Prost joined Ferrari, and he went on to win the championship, and Ayrton Senna and that. But I think their rivalry sort of died down a bit, and then they started to become a bit more sort of friends, I think, after that. A bit more, not necessarily friends, but respected each other more. And then after Alain Prost won that championship, he retired, because he wanted to retire. And we see Ayrton Senna going on to win another championship, which is fantastic. And I think that's round about sort of 92, something like that. And he was having a fantastic career. And then Alain Prost came back. He was going to join Williams, but he said, I do not want to have Ayrton Senna as my partner. But Ayrton Senna wanted also to come to Williams. And eventually Ayrton Senna did come to Williams, and the same year he came to Williams, there was a big controversial decision by the Formula One to remove some of the electronics from the car. Now, this was basically, they had like electronic suspension and things like this, which helped the cars from stopping spinning off at the high speeds. And I had all this, but a lot of the richer companies, I suppose, like Ferrari, McLaren's, Williams, at the time, could afford all these top-notch sort of like pieces, whereas the lower sort of companies, maybe Renault, Alfa Romeo, and things like that, could not afford these sort of like parts of the car. So to make it fair, they removed them all. And obviously, Senna said, this is the biggest mistake you've ever made in Formula One, because you're putting all safety at everybody. And then we get to that weekend in May 1993, where in the practice, one driver for one of the companies' car crashes, and he sadly loses his life. And this is just in the practice. And on the race day itself, unfortunately, Ayrton Senna lost his life. He crashed into the one of the walls, and he didn't break any bones or anything. I think he must have had a hemorrhage, and he died. He had a massive brain sort of hemorrhage due to there was no suspension in that car. And they were saying if that electronic suspension would have been in that car, he would have got up and walked away from the crash. But because that was removed, 2 people lost their lives. Fortunately, since then, they've obviously, safety is now the most important thing. I can't remember if we've actually lost anybody in Formula One since. I know we lost someone in Formula 2. No, actually we have. We lost Jaws, didn't we? He died in a Ferrari. So we have had one other death in there. We've had also a few years back, I don't know if you saw it, but there was a massive one with a car split in two, a Haas car, and it split in two, and it was it Romain Grosjean was in there, and it just sort of like set on fire, and you see him walk out of it. It was like, wow, how he managed to escape that, and he just come away with minor burns. But that's how safe the cars are now. And so it was like it's one of those sports that's really, it can be life-threatening, you know, because these people are going around at 200 miles an hour, and there's absolutely, you know, if something fails on that car, you're at the mercy of the car's safety. You know, has it been constructed safe enough? Obviously, back then, as you can see some of the clips, the cars were a lot more different than they are today. They were a lot more stouter, but also a bit more wider. But they just didn't have the sort of safety as they got now. As if you ever see any clips from any sort of crashes from the 80s and the 90s, the car just sort of like obliterates. Where now, that rarely happens. It tends to stay together. There has been a few occasions when there's been some nasty accidents, and it's one of the things that I hate to see anywhere, but it's one of the things of the sport. And these men that do this sport are just driven for the sense of probably wealth, but also the sense to win. I think it takes a special person to be a Formula One racer. I don't understand how they can do it. But anyway, what do I think of the documentary Senna? It's an absolutely incredible and fascinating watch. It's really great to see an in-depth sort of documentary on one of the world's greatest Formula One drivers. And it's absolutely fantastic. He unfortunately died at the age of 34, and so he didn't go on to progress his to greater things, because can you imagine what he would have done? And he'd probably still be around today, like Alain Prost is, and like Williams, and well, unfortunately we lost Frank Williams last year, didn't we? And some of the others, sort of like Nicky Lauda was still around. Unfortunately, we've lost him now, but they were still around having input to the the racing teams. And I think he would have been the same. He would have been like a coach or something like that, or even a principal. Who knows? But what an amazing man. The pluses of this documentary is that it's fantastic because it's all raw footage, so there's a lot of noise on the actual the look of the film, which I like because it was made of that time. And if they glammed it all up, making it look like Formula One today, it probably wouldn't have had the same impact. But it took you back to one of the golden ages of Formula One, where you see Senna, Prost, Schumacher, Mansell, you know, all these amazing drivers. Nicky Lauda's in there, you know, so absolutely fantastic. That's when it was in its real heyday and became really popular here in the UK. I mean, I remember when I was young, I used to sit and watch it with my dad. We used to love watching the Formula One. It was on the Sunday. It used to have the race on the Sunday. We'd sit and watch it, and it was great. My dad always used to fall asleep because it's 2 hours long, these races. But you know, it was great, and that's another attraction why I love Formula One so much, because it brings me that sort of special moment that I had with my father when he was alive. So it's special to me. But yeah, absolutely fantastic. I'm gonna score this an amazing watch and give it a 9 out of 10. I can't give it a 10 out of 10 because it's not really a movie, is it? And it's not like it's it's a part of history captured on film, and it's certainly worth a watch if you're into motor racing, or you're into Formula One, or you're interested in thinking, maybe it's something I could look at. Watch this, and you will see the dedication and the sort of like passion that these drivers have, and it really comes across in this documentary. There's no negatives about it because it's not a film that's going to be good or bad. It's a documentary, and it is an amazing one too. Senna, 9 out of 10. Any of you guys seen it? If you have, let me know down below what you thought of it. Do any of you like Formula One? Be interested to know, and who your favourite drivers are. I mean, I have a few. Obviously, my all-time favourite is Michael Schumacher, who is absolutely fantastic. But my favourite driver that's been around probably the past sort of like 15, 20 years is Fernando Alonso, everybody's least favourite, but I absolutely love the guy. I think he's got the right attitude. He's got a very sort of Elton Senna attitude. He's got a very Michael Schumacher attitude, and I love that about him. So he's my favourite racer, and I'm quite enjoying Max Verstappen as well. I think he's fantastic as well. They're my kind of favourites: Schumacher, Senna, Alonso, and Verstappen are probably 3 or 4 of my favourite drivers. But fantastic. Thanks for watching, guys. Look after yourselves, look after one another, and I really hope I see you all soon.